Quiet on the set. Here we go. Five, four, three, two, one. Hello, everybody. I'm Dear Myrtle, your friend in genealogy. Welcome to Mondays with Myrt, where we talk about anything and everything that's come across our Genia desk in the last week since last we met. And today is our special tribute to veterans. And joining me on the panel today, we've got a full panel. Randy Sievert's here, and Hillary's here, our gal in Wales, and Jill's here, and Maria's here, and Ellen, who's having interesting challenges with internet, and cousin Dave's here, and Dan Maloney's here. So that's our staff for today. Frank's helping his mother with her computer problem. So a shout out to Frank. We miss you, but family comes first. That is for sure. So we've got some comments coming in. Let's see what's happening out on the YouTube side. Hi, Justine. Yes, you're halfway through your lunch break normally by now. It is a federal holiday here in the United States. It's Veterans Day. Elsewhere, it's called Remembrance Day. Um, your niece, Sherry, has active duty at the National Guard, and she has been deployed for the last year. Wow. Thank you, Sherry, for working the YouTube side for us as a co-host. Same to Melinda Coupon. Stormy Western Oregon and Flo. I've noticed that the storms down in Oregon and which are south of me, and up above me, it's all part of a huge storm front coming through. And you got it bad down there. I know. Take it easy. Melinda is doing what I've asked. I want everyone, if you could please list the names of your ancestors, your relatives that have served in the military. Ruth Coupon and her mother-in-law and her father, Charles. And very good. Let's see. Oh, there's Flo again. I'll start at the top and work down. And there's Melinda. I love that picture of you, Melinda. Cool but dry in Chula Vista. Thank you, Randy, on the panel. Sunny Shaker Heights, Ohio. And do, John, let me know if you have ancestors that served. Okay, and Central Iowa is sunny. And Minnesota honoring all veterans today and always. And yes, please do share your family names. Let's see what's happening. There's my writing accountability partner. Good morning from Spokane, Washington. You got a storm heading your way, dear. It was pelting, pouring, drenching, pounding rain earlier. Yes, and thank you for that. Let me know who your veterans are. And I think we pretty much caught up with most people so far. Oh, Karen is saying that both her grandparents and her father, and now both of her sons, you have a strong tradition of military service. Jill is saying career Navy Jim Jacobson and Alice Jacobson, sister-in-law. And Jill also, wow, not all direct, but if they're your cousins once removed, something like that, I mean, we need to honor their service. Jill, can you read their names? Civil War CW, we know that.
Sure. So we have Alfred Berg, who's like a half great great uncle, and
Mm-hmm.
World War One was Obo Berg. I know these are very unusual names,
That's why
and
I asked you to say him.
he's a half great uncle, but not the son of Alfred,
Okay.
but of another person. And my dad served in the OSS, the Office of the Secret Service, and so he could never talk about his service. When I got his World War II file, it was 10 pages long. So
Wow.
I know there's more there for my dad. And then my father-in-law and my mother-in-law both served. And then my brother was in Vietnam, and then he went on to be in career Navy and met his wife there as well.
Wow. And you and I and most of the others on the panel remember the Vietnam conflict and the difficulty that the soldiers had on their return here in the United States. Can't speak for other countries. That was a very, very difficult time.
Yes.
Thank you. So Karen out there is saying, oh, yep, I got that one. Deneen is saying light rain. The world's greatest neighbor, my neighbor Maria from South Jordan, two brothers, Mark and John, and her great uncle, who was serving in Guam during World War II and was taken and survived POW camps in Japan.
Wow.
Oh, man. Yeah. Here's Deneen's military. Dad was in the Army Air Corps during World War II, China, Burma, India. Oh, my gosh. Difficult. Being married to Mr. Myrt, I'm learning a lot more about military conflicts that were beyond the scope that I could view, which was Vietnam or what I've learned about my ancestors. And at China, Burma, India, really hard. I don't think anybody's military service is easy. Justine is saying my dad, Ray, my uncle, Doug, born over in England, and her brother, Joe, and her two grandfathers, Doug and Joseph. Hillary, tell me, it's good to have you speak the names.
Well, of the people that I've put on there,
Yeah.
Trevor Owens, Gene Owens, and Tony Hopkins. These are all people that are my cousins that in the States. So
Good, sir. Okay, thank you.
they've all served in the US military.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, and Miriam adds, I've had ancestors serve in America's military from World War II back to the colonial days. Very proud of my Army National Guard active duty nephew, River T, right now. Justine said her dad's parents met in England, and both my grandmothers lost their brothers. Yeah, and was it particularly World War II where we had the flags with the blue stars for service in the window, and you would know how many servicemen from that family served, and then there would be the occasion to have to sew a gold star over the blue when one was lost. Okay. Office of Strategic Services. Okay. There's an emphasis there from Bill. Thank you. Thank you, John, for your service. Also, your father, Tracy Cunningham Jr., Uncle Miles Walston, Seatsinger. You guys are giving me beautiful names to try to say. Uncle David Abraham Gershenson, Uncle George Albert Foote, great-grandfather Elijah Cunningham, and fourth great-grandfather Thomas A. McReynolds. Beautiful names. And we're saying these, but these are people who led lives and had some, at Veterans Day we talk about anyone who served. On Memorial Day here in the United States, it's when we talk about those who died during their service or later as a result of injuries suffered during their service. So, yeah, more new comments. Okay. Okay, your turn again, Hillary. Your great uncle served?
Yeah, both two of my great uncles, my grandmother's brothers, served in World War One. Another one actually signed up, but he didn't actually go and do any service. Both Sydney and Roy both lost their lives in World War One, either died of inaction or died of wounds.
Mm. It's incredible. I'm glad we could say their names. Justine says, I give my dad's mother, Eunice, a lot of credit. She lost one of her brothers in World War II. Then my uncle enlisted in the Air Force, and then my dad was drafted.
Mhm.
And then she said, my uncle came back, and then my dad went to Vietnam. And here's our Betty Lou, who says, my Bosch line, my paternal great-grandfather's family had cousins fight on both sides of World War One. Our brother served us for the U.S., and her cousin served for Italy. And I did listen. I was trying to go back through and add some of the archive videos that regarding veterans and military service. I'll send you some links in a little while. And I listened to part of the opening of a Veterans Day, and in it I said something that I still believe. Um, it's except for certain leaders that may be unkind and begin to cover what those kinds of ruthless leaders are in World War II or any other war. War on either side was not pretty, and war had a great impact at home. When you think about it, raising children on our own happened for women because of war. And when a guy comes back, or a gal, doesn't mean they're that same person that left. The things that happened that they saw. And I don't mean to be so maudlin, but this is a tender subject. All right, a little bit more. Gosh, you had a lot of people serving, Justine. You've done a lot of research. My maternal grandmother lost her brother in Korea, and I sent away for, and I have his individual deceased file. And Melinda is saying that her grandfather served in both the Army and the Navy in World War One. Wow. And one more, and then we'll get on to some more kinds of sharing. My maternal grandfather was one of 6 sons and stepsons who served in World War II. One, John Chester Volk, Uncle Chet, died during the Battle of the Bulge. And I am privileged, she is privileged to be the keeper of his Purple Heart. Wow. Okay. Thank you, guys. And keep letting me know about this. Keep sending in names. Keep letting me know. And maybe Randy or somebody can put a star on the ones that I didn't get. Like Diane Bush is saying, her grandpa and step grandpa were both in the Civil War. What I like to do is switch gears, and we're going to have our newest panelist, Dan, share a post that he made over on Substack. And those of you who don't know, that's a very legitimate place to blog. Could you zoom in a little bit more, because there's going to be a lot of black space on the sides, and I want people to be able to see some of your documents. Great. So this is your great grandfather. Go ahead and tell me about him. This is, by the way, before you start, guys and gals, this guy has done a very good blog post. He's labeled his photos. There are documents that support the conclusions he's made. Even has postcards of an area that bring to mind where this great grandfather was. This is an exemplary and very lengthy blog post. But let's find out about this gentleman and his background. Okay, I'll be quiet.
Thank you for the kind words, Myrt. I appreciate it. I spent more time than anybody in my family tree researching my great-grandfather. This photograph here is a photograph of my great-grandfather. His name was John Harrington. Um, he lived a really interesting life, and he had a lot of unique experiences. One of those being his time on the front lines in France during the First World War as part of the Canadian Machine Gun Corps. This is a photograph that I colorized. It wasn't originally in color, but I spent a lot of meditative time kind of painstakingly painting it, for lack of a better word, in Photoshop, and doing my best to kind of match the greens from specimens that I was able to find of his uniform.
You look like your great grandfather. You're like the spitting image of him, down to the eyebrows and the nose and everything.
Yeah, we both have a lot of Irish origins, so we that we share.
Yeah, you made his insignias. So he's is that infantry when it's the crossed guns like that?
Yeah, he was in what's known as the Canadian Machine Gun Corps, and so he was a machine gunner on the front lines. I actually have on my desk the lapel pins and his. This is a Canadian Machine Gun Corps. It says MG Canada.
Okay,
this would have been worn on his.
Okay, hold it up again. Hold it up
Sure.
again, so that we can see. Yeah. Yeah. MG machine gun. Yeah.
And I also have, this would be a larger version of that would be worn on, say, a hat. I believe this is a hat pin with the kind of crossed machine guns. And I keep these on my desk. That I think they're, to me, a source of inspiration. And, kind of having them right underneath my monitor is, it reminds me of, no matter what I'm going through in life, my great-grandfather went through things that were a lot tougher, and it's definitely a source of inspiration for me.
I definitely get that, because yeah, we have nothing to complain about. We have very cushy lives because of the work that people have done, that have gone before. Okay.
Definitely.
So you got a lot to get through. Tell me about his childhood, just briefly.
Yeah, so my great-grandfather, he was born in Upper Clapton in East London, England. This is his birth registration. He was not born John Harrington. He was born with the name John Wright, which was the same name as his father, also named John Wright. And his mother was a woman by the name of Mary Ann Harrington. And that's where his surname would eventually come from. His early life was, to put it bluntly, quite tragic. His father, this is a newspaper article that I found describing his father, where he got into quite a bit of an argument with a police constable in Leytonstone in London, where they were living at the time. And he ended up having to, attend court and pay a fine due to his kind of drunken, disorderly conduct. So needless to say, I don't think he was a great influence on my great-grandfather when he was growing up.
His parents never married, did they?
No, they were never married. They had four children. Two were twins. Elizabeth, who was born in 1891, my great-grandfather, who was born in 1894, and then twin sisters that were born in 1897. Both the Elizabeth and one of the twin sisters died when they were infants. So he only had one living sister with him, throughout his early life in England. Mary Ann Harrington, my great-grandfather's mother, she had troubles in her childhood as well. Her parents were Irish immigrants who came from the Beara Peninsula in southwestern Cork. And not soon after arriving in England, they had a few children. They had Timothy, who was a little bit older than my great-grandfather's mother, Mary Ann. And they had Ellen Harrington, who would be my great-grandmother, or my great-grandmother's, or my great-grandfather, I should say, aunt. And my great-grandfather's mother, Mary Ann, all born in London. But not soon after the children were born, they unfortunately died of disease, which was kind of a common theme in London at the time. You had things like cholera, tuberculosis, lots of different kind of pandemic-style diseases that if you were in the wrong place at the wrong time, it was easy to get claimed by something like that.
Well, water was not from a secure source, and they didn't. Dad told me penicillin wasn't really in popular use until World War II. They had no way to fight disease, so they had some inoculations. But you're right. When you're poor and you live in squalor, it's very difficult. So tell me what a home child is.
So a British home child was young people, boys and girls, who either were orphans or didn't have parents who could financially or didn't have the will to take care of them. And they would end up in different sorts of institutions across Britain and Ireland. One of the most prominent ones, the one where my great-grandfather ended up, was known as Barnardo's Homes, started by Dr. Barnardo in East London. But there's also other intake homes, such as Fegans in Ireland, Quarriers in Scotland, Middlemore Homes, even the Church of England and the Salvation Army were involved in taking young British children and emigrating them to the New World, particularly Canada and Australia. These children would be what were known as indentured servants. So they would work as either domestic labor or as farmhands on the farms of the families that took them in. And they would work throughout the day. They would, in exchange for food and lodging, and eventually they would, find their own path in Canada. The contract that they would enter into would take them until the age of 14, and usually after that, children would stay on with that family or another until they were either 16 or 18 and try and find their own path in Canada.
So this reminds me of orphan trains here in the United States. And that's why I brought Hillary back up on the panel, on the stage. But Hillary actually had a great uncle who was in the Barnardo's home before he served in World War I. You have a suggestion for Dan if he needs it.
Yeah, if you want to find out any more about the workhouses, there's a really good website called The Work. I think if you just put in the workhouse, you'll find it come up. And the person that created it has got lots of information about all the individual workhouses on there, if you've not already seen it.
Yeah, definitely. That's a site I've been on a number of times. My great-grandfather, he was in a workhouse known as, well, he wasn't. It was more of a children's home, but essentially a workhouse known as the Children's Fold in East London. I think I may have a photograph of it somewhere.
Can you find the link to the workhouse website? Because I Googled it and there's several workhouse websites. I want to get the one you're talking about because it's pretty extensive. Now this picture that you're showing us now that's not the actual building, but it's the place, right?
It's what the building looks like today. Yeah.
Right.
So this would have been the location of the home that he was in. So he was given up to Dr. Barnardo's Homes. His father ended up abandoning the family, and his mother, Mary Ann Harrington, relied on her sister, Ellen, for support. They were neighbors in East London. Ellen had a number of children of her own, and Mary Ann certainly relied on her as somebody that would allow her to go out and earn work. She would rely on Ellen for things like childcare. Ellen passed away when she was quite young, in her late 40s, and that left Mary Ann alone with 2 children in East London, and my great-grandfather was given up to Dr. Barnardo's Homes. So this is the home he spent a year in East London, and during that year he would have been trained and prepared and working on farms and getting ready to make the big jump from the urban sprawl of East London to rural Ontario, Canada, where I grew up.
Totally different environment, rural versus city life, and away from people who have the same accent and cook the same foods, etc. Look at that. That picture is from when he was first taken into the home, is it not?
It is, yeah. This is his admission photograph. So this would have been it was taken of all Barnardo's children when they were entered into the home. So it's kind of a bittersweet treasure to have. If circumstances were different, I wouldn't necessarily have this photograph of him, but it's certainly kind of a tragic photo nonetheless.
Okay, just a little minute here. I'd like to bring Jill in. You've been doing you published a book about orphans that had a similar fate,
Right.
From whatever circumstances that caused them to become orphans. I'll bet
Right.
you would have loved to have seen photos for intake of every one of them.
Well, certainly, but the photo that I have as a background actually is the orphans that came to Hamilton County in 1890 out of New York City to the very rural Hamilton County, Iowa. So I certainly understand what Jan is talking about there. There were also home children that went from England into orphanages in Canada. And a lot of people have that recollection as well. As
opposed to going right to a farm.
Right. These kids here, which were only about a third of the group that ended up in Hamilton County, this group right here went mostly to farms to serve as labor on the farms, because there was very little support labor for families that may not have had children.
So Dan, do you have any knowledge of what happened immediately upon arrival in Canada? Was there a home that he was in for a short time, or did somebody meet the boat? Like orphan trains out of New York from the Children's, I'm thinking
Aid Society.
Yeah.
Children's Aid Society and the Foundling Hospital primarily. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they would just be escorted in a group and take a train, and at stops along the way, their guardian would line them up on the at the train station, and people would select and there would be some paperwork with the theory of coming back to see if the kid was okay and it was working out. Didn't always get that. And then whoever remained got back on the train with the guardian and they went to the next train. So we're trying to put your ancestors' experience in the context of what we know about, that's how we assimilate information.
Definitely.
Before I get back to you, let me share a few things on the screen. This is the link that Hillary has shared called the Workhouse that you mentioned you also used. We have looked at this before. As we discussed, what's a workhouse? What are the poor law unions? We've done that in past old Myrt Cousin Russ days. What were the buildings like? And then Hillary shared this website, which is Bernardo's specific website. They've been changing childhoods for over 150 years, for as long as we're needed. So that's the gentleman in question. Gosh, I guess I should zoom in. Can't get much. There we are. I'm glad somebody stepped up. It's never ideal, but where else would these folks go? I don't know. Okay, back to you. Thank you, Jill and Hillary, for discussing your experiences and sharing. Okay, so we want to get to the part of, no vaccination marks. 48 pounds for an 8-year-old, that's pretty lightweight.
Definitely, yeah. This is a intake document completed by Dr. Barnardo's, which would include kind of his details, his personal details, and also kind of a bit of a background story, which is certainly a treasure, where they would kind of describe the circumstances that led this child into Dr. Barnardo's care.
Wow.
My great-grandfather, oh, sorry.
I couldn't believe this. Vermin bites on his body. I mean, That guy had a rough life. Okay. This is incredible. A whole different record set than I've seen. Okay.
So my great-grandfather, he would have, he sailed from Liverpool, and he landed in Portland in Maine. That was the destination of his ship. Barnardo's would send their children at this time, particularly to Portland, Maine in the United States, because they had less stringent rules with regards to the health, how the health was assessed upon landing of the children. So there's a document from Barnardo's. A lot of this stuff is kind of published open source on the Library Archives Canada, and one of the documents described how they particularly sent these children through to Portland, Maine, just to get around the Canadian government's stricter rules for the health and wellness of the passengers arriving.
Well, and had they come in through the Port of New York, it would have been very stringent. Even, let's see, is that the Castle Guard? What time did he come over?
1902.
Oh yeah, so it would have been Ellis, and they are very stringent. So, but they had the facility and space and buildings, and so Portland, Maine, I can't imagine was that equipped.
So from Portland, Maine, he would have taken a train to Toronto, here in Ontario, and Barnardo's had a receiving home there, and he would have spent a very short time there before he was boarded onto a train by himself with basically, a ticket and probably a sign.
Yeah, little card like we sent our kids with a sign to kindergarten.
Exactly.
So they put on the right bus. Oh,
And so from Toronto, he came to a place that's known as Muskoka, which is the place that I grew up in. It's, in terms of Canada, quite a notable place. Today, it's kind of the Canadian version of the American Hamptons. It's where celebrities go, where they have their summer homes. Movie stars, sports stars, they all flock to Muskoka to spend their summer months and to have their cottages and lavish lifestyles. But back then, it was really a rural frontier. It was a beautiful place. Obviously, that's why so many people have been gravitated towards it. But back then, it was not great farmland. It's part of the Canadian Shield, so it's not the prime choice of farmland here in Ontario. It was a lot of hard livestock, hard farming in Muskoka.
Valerie is saying, story of this child and so many others are heartbreaking. Well, let's turn the page and talk about his military service, which was not easy either.
So this is my great-grandfather in his uniform. So he served with the Canadian Machine Gun Corps he was drafted in 1917 and he enlisted in early 1918. Himself, like many other home children, a lot of them joined the Canadian forces at the outbreak of the First World War. My great-grandfather included. He arrived back in England. So the first and only time he ever returned back to England was with his service in the First World War. He arrived back in early 1918, or springtime. He did his training at Seaford Camp in Sussex. And if we scroll down, by the summer of 1918, he found himself on the front lines in France. This is a picture that I colorized as well. It is a picture of my great-grandfather pictured with the trenches of France in the background, and on the back of the card, it was written by him, "On the front lines" was the inscription. And this is one of my favorite pictures. It's got a lot of depth to it. I really really enjoy this one. So he spent the balance of the summer of 1918 on the front lines in France, all the way up to the Second Battle of Cambrai, which was a part of the larger Battle of Canal du Nord, which was an offensive led by the Canadian and the British Allied forces as part of what's known as Canada's 100 Days campaign. So that was kind of an organized movement for the Allies to try and end the war in Europe within 100 days. So that was their offense from England into the trenches of France, and the push westward to try and end the war as quickly as possible. In this battle, so he was wounded. He was hit with what was described as shrapnel, likely from a shrapnel shell, in his head and in his shoulders. And that took him off the front lines. In one document, it described how it affected his hearing. He described how he had to kind of recover his hearing. The extent really of his injuries are kind of tough to to grasp through the military documents. They're generally not super specific on, how gravely he was wounded, but he was sent to the Herne Bay men's convalescent home in Kent, England, to recover. So he was taken off the front lines and brought back to Herne Bay in Kent, where he would spend the balance of the war. He was wounded at the end of September, and the war ended today, on the 11th of November in 1918. So he would have spent the balance of the war here at the Herne Bay convalescent home.
Wow. What a story. Now, did you know him? Were you alive when you're much younger than I am, so I can't even judge.
I didn't know. He died about 10 years before I was born.
Yeah.
I grew up with his daughter, my grandmother, in the same town where he originally came in 1902, as did my mother. So my grandmother would always share her stories about her father with me. And that's what got me into genealogy in the beginning. Being a British home child was something that my grandmother spent a lot of time trying to figure out in an era before the internet. And when I came along and had technical prowess, I was her kind of her smart hands, so to speak, helping her with her own genealogy research.
He didn't have he did have some pleasant times that you know of, like this article that you have on the screen describes a fishing derby that was a interesting activity for the soldiers as they were convalescing. However, I think sharks intervened, did they not? Or was it a
It
dolphin?
was a porpoise.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think. So yeah, this is a newspaper article that I found really an interesting article. My great grandfather, one of the items, the cherished items that I have of his, I've got it
Oh my. Let me
here.
bring that in. Yeah. Show us again. Yeah.
So of the items that I've inherited from my great grandfather, this is a small black, kind of black, was black at one time, notebook. Yeah. And this was really a key in my own research. When I first was looking at it, it says Private J. Harrington, presented by the Angler Society at Herne Bay, October 15th, 1918, fishing competition. And I remember reading that and thinking, well, what kind of fishing competition would he have been in the trailing end of the First World War? That seemed so unusual. So this article kind of explains what took place. So the Angler Society, the Fishing Society at Herne Bay, they had organized a fishing competition, kind of as a morale booster for the wounded soldiers. So they would take them out on the pier, and there was a fishing derby that was interrupted by wildlife. There wasn't great fishing, but there was some camaraderie, and thankfully this notebook, which is really treasured for me, especially because on the first page,
they let me put that back up. Yep. There we go. It's coming in slowly but slowly.
This is a scan of the first page of the notebook. You can see it says Private J. Harrington, presented by the Angler Society at Herne Bay. And it's got his military details. But on the first page, he has entries. Cousin, Miss Fanny Green of Woodhouse Road, Leytonstone, and Miss Toms of Lansdowne Road, Leytonstone. Yeah. So these were both of his first cousins. they were the children of Ellen Harrington. He apart from this document, really, I had no idea that he even knew his first cousins. And finding out this through this notebook that he was in touch with them while he was back in England, for me was really heartwarming. He was such, a destitute young boy, and now he was a soldier, being able to reconnect with these people that he spent clearly, a decent portion of his a close connection in his childhood with. So for me, finding out that he was back in touch with his cousins, first cousins back in East London, for me was really a remarkable find. That was, so special to figure that out.
Absolutely incredible. Scroll down so you can see this picture.
So this is a photograph of my great-grandfather directly after the war. This was the family of the farm of the Henderson family, which was a family that he stayed with, and he worked in their farm here in southwestern Ontario.
I wonder, in looking at that, have you considered the hairline on what looks like, in this case, it would be his left side of his head? Do you think that he had that's where the head injury was?
Yeah, I think that's probably likely. I think to a certain extent, the photograph is a little overexposed, so it's really kind of tough to see. Kind of particularly, what's happening with his hairline.
Okay.
But I think, yeah, he certainly, as my grandmother described, he did have, scarring on his the side of his head and on his back from the shrapnel that he was hit with.
Yeah. Well, John Harrington is your ancestor. This is his. I loved his smile then, and I love this smile. This is a successful police officer, member of the community.
So after my great-grandfather returned to Canada, he tried a few different professions. He said he tried the mail service, and he didn't like that. And then he was a fireman for a bit, and he didn't really like that either. And then he found policing. This is a photograph of him as a police constable in Chatham, Ontario, southwestern Ontario. Clearly, it looked like he enjoyed it, as he did. He spent his entire career as a police officer, eventually returning back to Muskoka, where he grew up as a boy in Canada, where he came to Canada as a boy. And he became the chief of police of the town. This is a photograph of him in the center with his deputies and his police car that I'm sure he was very, very proud of. He served as the chief of police for 20 years in Bracebridge, the town that I grew up in. And interestingly, he also received a medal from the Queen for his contributions to the town of Bracebridge on the 25th anniversary of the Queen Elizabeth Jubilee. And so this was an award that he was nominated for by the citizens of Bracebridge. Obviously, they had a high degree of respect for his service to the community. And to me, I think it's really kind of interesting that, a boy that the kingdom had all but forgotten about was receiving, in his older age, was receiving a medal from the Queen. I think that's a really come from behind story.
Totally come from behind story. An incredible story. And Miriam says, you've done a tremendous job of documenting his life with words, photos, documents, and artifacts. Well done. Well done. What What? Now, I'm not expecting people to do blog posts like this. Oh, there he is. There's that smile.
Yeah,
How
this is the
your
last
character
photograph
always.
I have of my great grandfather. This was taken shortly before he passed away.
Oh,
Um, and yeah, for me, his smile is really great. He certainly had a tough life, a tough early life, but his resilience to me is really impressive, and it's certainly an inspiration in my own life, learning where he came from and how he persevered through what was really tough odds. Not all home children have a great story like this. Some of them are horribly tragic, um, and his is one that thankfully turned out better than average, I would say. So
mhm.
for me, it's
Incredible.
really kind of my service to be able to document his story and to share it with others.
And and what an inspiration. That, as an this is the his blood is coursing through your veins, and I'm not being overly dramatic. I'm saying this is your heritage. This is who. This is a guide for uh, putting things in perspective and carrying on. You know, an incredible story, and we've thank you for sharing this, because when you're sharing this, this is also teaching each one of us how to consider the lives of our ancestors. Now, I'm not expecting everyone to do a huge long blog post like that, Maria. Don't panic. Just the childhood is enough, and then the middle years, and then the history of whatever the home was, and the doctor, Bernard, Bernardo, I'm trying to say it, but I'm coming up Italian by mistake. And then the just the a blog post on the discussion of why they came in through Portland, Maine, and then the concept of an 8-year-old boy going by train by himself. I can't even imagine. Any one of these segments could take 2 or 3 blog posts.
Definitely, yeah.
But you consolidated to make it easy for us today. Um, Diane is saying this documentation of his life was a gift you have given future generations. And thank you for sharing it outside your family so we can also be inspired. Yeah, thank you. All right, we're going to go to the go to the docket. And this time we're going to switch gears, and I'm going to have Randy stay on the stage. Hillary, if you can take everyone to the wings. We're going to be looking at a Veterans Day tribute that in a different way that Randy did. Thank you. And I will share my screen, of course. Gosh, interesting. So this is from 2023, but it still applies.
Yeah, so I only listed my ancestors, but there are people like my brother who served in during Vietnam in the Air Force,
Mhm.
and Asa Hill Reed, who was killed on the way to Concord in the Revolution
Oh
at
my.
age 19, that I haven't mentioned. But so my father was a mailman third class during World War II on the USS Halford, which was a destroyer up in Alaska, up in
Mhm.
Pacific Ocean. And I was a year old when he left, and I was 2 years old when he came back. and, uh, and so I don't remember any of that, unfortunately. Uh, and then the next one down is my grandfather, my mother's father, Lyle Carringer, who uh, served in the U.S. Marine Reserves, and he never left San Diego. Uh, the Marines had a camp in Balboa Park, right
Mhm.
where now all the museums are,
Mhm.
and it had a PX and he served in the PX, basically, in the reserves. So, but he looks great in his uniform. And he got married about this time. He got married in 1918. And so I have a number of pictures like this.
You know, I think it's important to recognize the home front is an important part
Yeah.
of service.
And the training too, you know.
Yep,
Yeah.
the training. For instance, like Mr. Myrt served he was in the military during World War II, U.S. Army. He had been in the reserves and then he was activated. And he was over in Germany, but that was in that time period. So he didn't see hand-to-hand combat. But it's all part of the whole mechanism. There has to be staff support. There has to be training. There has to be support for, like at the PX, for the family that's home, etc. I totally get that. Yeah. All right. So now you're to Civil War.
And then in the Civil War, I only have one ancestor who served in the Civil War. I have probably a number of uncles who did. But Isaac Seaver, after 330 years of my Seaver line in Massachusetts, Isaac Seaver joined the Union Army in the 4th Massachusetts Artillery, heavy artillery. He was a blacksmith, and so all the artilleries were pulled by what? Horses and other animals. And consequently, a blacksmith was very useful. He got to go to Washington, D.C. He got an all-expense paid trip to Washington, D.C. And I don't think he saw any conflict.
Okay.
But I have his Revolutionary War pension file. I'm sorry, Civil War pension file that you helped me find.
Yes.
And then in the War of 1812, I have 3 people that I've identified as serving, at least. I don't know much about them. Isaac Lanphier is a 4th great grandfather, Amos is 4th, and Benjamin Seaver is 3rd.
And you do have a pension file on Isaac. So cool.
I have a pension file for Isaac. His wife died at age 98 or something like that in 1882 or 1881. She didn't get the pension until late 1870s. They just didn't give them out, you know. And then in the Revolution, I have 18. So I've identified 3, 5, 6 of them have a pension file. All the first 7 there are all German ancestry people. Peter Putman was Dutch ancestry too, but married a German. All from Pennsylvania and New York. And then Burgess Metcalf was English origin, and he was in Grafton County, New Hampshire. And the other 11 were on my father's side, all in New England. A couple from Rhode Island.
So these were not. So these that were German up above, they were not part of the Hessian soldiers.
No, they were all
already over here.
They're all already here.
Okay.
Couple of them Palatines and a couple of them in Philadelphia in the 1730s, 1759, that type of thing. Yeah.
Okay.
And they served. And thank you.
Well, that's incredible.
So that's my list. And I would encourage people to, I publish this every year. I think that's the 19th one I've done. I did one today, this morning, not this one. But I just copy and paste. But it's a reminder, to all of us that we owe a debt of gratitude to every one of these people and everyone who served.
I totally appreciate your showing us this. This is how we show respect. I would like to share mine now, if you don't mind. I speak of him periodically. William Henry A. Phillips went by Henry Phillips. Thank heavens in his Union Civil War pension file, his wife explained that he was William H. Phillips this way after during his service and after, and he was Henry Phillips before his military service. I don't have anybody else who's got of my male ancestors that has 3 given names. But anyway, I'm really glad to know that he was born in Delaware County, Indiana, and I'll show you in a bit why I know that. Because everything else we'd known about him was Knoxville, Iowa, and there's a lot of William and or Henry Phillips in Iowa, and also even in Delaware County, Indiana. I haven't figured out who his parents actually are for sure. He served in Company K, 19th Indiana Infantry, and they were known as the part of the Iron Brigade, along with 2 Wisconsin units. And that's because of battles in which they served valiantly in Virginia before Gettysburg. And those of you who know my story with Cousin Russ, this gentleman and one of Cousin Russ's ancestors, who's Confederate, were both at Culp's Hill. And we had taken a specific tour, a hand-guided tour. The tour guide actually got in Mr. Myrt's truck with me and Mr. Myrt and Patty Worthington and Cousin Russ Worthington to show us where his ancestor was and where mine was. Now, the reason he served in Company K of 19th Indiana, that was where he initially mustered in, was because in Indiana they were mustering him in by county, basically. And so his was 19th Indiana, and when you look at the other people that mustered in, they were neighbors and they were part of the fan club. On day 1 of Gettysburg, 19th Indiana was fully engaged as the Confederates. Lee's army was coming from the west, approaching Gettysburg, and they kept pushing the Iron Brigade back. In the first day of battle, they lost 80% of his 19th Indiana, his friends, and their CO. And when we were driving through town, and the guide had us notice the pockmarks on the brick buildings, and that was from sniper fire. And I knew that the 19th Indiana, as the guide was explaining, was being pushed back into retreat from Seminary and up and then down through the city of Gettysburg. I said, they must have been running ragged. And I know my guy tripped and hurt his left hip on a railroad crossing area, which the railroad crossing is still there. It's not a different one. And the guide was quick to say, oh no, 19th was at the very back of this whole retreat, and they were walking backwards, laying suppressing fire to defend their folks. So when we get to Culp's Hill by the 3rd day at Gettysburg, we have the 19th Indiana with only 20%, and they were damaged and hurt like my this great-grandfather. And they reorganized into Company E, 20th Indiana Infantry. So that's why he has service in both of those. And that happened a lot during the Civil War, from what I've learned and from research I've done. And then Culp's Hill isn't just a hill. it's a long, narrow hill, like a ridge. And my guy, William Henry Phillips, was that Company E of the 20th Indiana Infantry was only getting organized, and they were not engaged in that battle. And Cousin Russ's Confederate, we actually had Cousin Russ stand on that east side, southeast side of that Culp's Hill. And what an uphill battle it would be with the Union Army up higher. You don't want to be down below. You want to have the anyway. So at least our ancestors were not in hand-to-hand combat against each other. But that VRC I want to tell you about, I didn't relate to it. I did not know what it was. This is where I saw it but didn't think about it. I had done research. This is the index card, one of two index cards on William H. Phillips. And of course, it reflects that he was a private in Company K, 19th Indiana. Here's his application and certificate. And for those of you who are just starting out with Union Civil War pensions, yes, there were some Confederate pensions. Some states did give pensions to Confederates. But I'm talking about a Union here. When a widow applies, they take his pension file, if he had one, and then incorporates it with her request for a pension as the widow. And that's why you're not getting two files. When I first went to the National Archives, I wanted to order this file and this file. And then they very sweetly explained to me they're all going to be in 907389. Makes sense, doesn't it? It's part of the proof of his service. But when I submitted to the Daughters of Union Veterans of the Civil War, 1861-1865, the person that was going over my application and my proofs, my proof document, she said, "Oh, he served in the Veterans Reserve Corps." And I'm like, "What's that?" VRC. She said, "That's Company A, or 17th Regiment of the Veterans Reserve Corps." And Mr. Myrt has told me a little bit about what they did. It's not like our reserves, where right now, if Mr. Myrt were still in the U.S. Army Reserves, he would go up for service one weekend a month and maybe for 2 weeks in the summer or whatever, and could be called up to active duty as he was during Vietnam at any point in time. But this gave these soldiers, they would work with recruiting, I don't know all that they did. But that's when I first became aware of Veterans Reserve Corps. What's missing is the 20th Indiana. It's not listed here, but it is reflected in his very detailed, well, I should say lengthy. It's a nice thick pension file. And once I did his and a few others, that's why I was able to do Randy's, to see what was available compared to what he was given when he ordered it from the National Archives. Isn't that what our project was, Randy? That we were trying to compare and contrast what I saw of the entire file versus what you received?
Yeah.
That was what we did. And I didn't bother to crop and make them real pretty. I just quickly took a picture of everything because you had a good sized file too. It's still on my hard drive somewhere. Anyway, okay. This, I knew his death date because of the Goring family Bible that I have that has come down through the family. This is my grandmother Frances's grandpa. And I love this beard because it helps me identify a picture that I have of my grandmother at about 5 years of age, standing next to a house in Knoxville, Iowa, that Gordon and I were able to find, except they'd renumbered the street, so it was confusing. And she calls him her her dear papa. That's not for father, but for grandfather. Um, her dad was clean shaven. Anyway, another thing to share with you. Now this looks rumpled because this is exactly my photocopy that I made of a card from microfilm that was taken at the State Historical Society of Iowa in Des Moines. That's their state archives. And it was actually on an LDS microfilm of GAR records, so I could have ordered it. I just didn't know he was in the GAR. Grand Army of the Republic is not a military, um, uh, it's like the American Legion, where it's after the person has served. It's an association of soldiers. And he was in Post 49, Marion County. And so that's my scribbling in pencil, which is all we could take into the archives. The source of, so that I could do a source citation. I recognized it was the right William H. Phillips because Louisa Terry is the known wife, and Mrs. Charles Goring is my grandmother, Frances Irene Goring. Frances Irene Goring, but long story. Anyway, here's the part where I learned a lot about transferring to Company E, 20th Indiana Infantry. And also, there's something else that looks interesting to me. It explains that the ex-soldier is living in Iowa as of 1886. That was good because we don't have the 1890 census. That's the closest I could get to him. But he was in Knoxville and died there in 1921. He was a barber, which is interesting. He didn't shave. But I digress. Before I did this research, let me go back a screen or two. Before I had this, I knew from his pension file, and I really should finish digitizing that whole thing. I knew that he had been discharged to an Army hospital, to Douglas Hospital in Washington, D.C., because he'd fallen and injured as he's walking backwards, I guess, injured that left hip. And this was the interior. It's not the interior of the Douglas Hospital. It's the Ward K of the Armory Square Hospital in 1865 in Washington, D.C. And I figured they probably organized these formal hospitals in pretty much the same manner with the same equipment. And that was sort of akin to what Dan was doing when he included those two postcards of what the area looked like that his ancestor went to in Canada once he got to that place where it's become popularized among the wealthy. Can't imagine. It gets cold in DC, and I don't see insulation there. That would be a little bit chilly, but I don't know. And I have mentioned before, it wasn't bad to be left in a tent outside. You had better air circulation, but he still can't imagine it. And I did go and find his gravestone. I've been there several times now, so that I could put the flag there. This is the GAR insignia that caused me to start looking at GAR records. And his daughter next, Louisa, is buried next in this small area next. And I'm really lucky. I found this. They had an office, but it was locked the first time I went to this cemetery. And the second time, I pretty much remembered where it was. But as I walk through the cemetery, and it's not in this picture, I noticed there are in the immediate within a 25-foot either way, north or south or to the east, names that I recognize on the other side of the family. So interesting. Anyway, that's my ancestor, William Henry A. Phillips. I don't know what the A stands for. All right. What are we doing on the YouTube side over there? Let's see what the comments are. And I'll discontinue my PowerPoint if I can. All right. Got all kinds of comments. I'll probably let me pull them up. So this is an interesting question from Betty Lou. Are those who refuse to fight, did those work in support areas? I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if Mr. Myrt's listening. We're working on keeping my bandwidth up today. We'd have to ask. Anybody have an opinion on that? Let me pull you guys up, and gals. Have you any experience with knowing the answer to that? Jump in here.
I think one of my uncles served as a stretcher bearer or something like that in and that. But I don't know. I couldn't find. I thought some of them maybe didn't serve, but then I found things. So I don't know. Sometimes maybe they have joined the medical corps and just helped as orderlies or something like that. Sometimes just rather than not serving at all. Sometimes obviously the conscientious objectors get differently, particularly more recently.
Okay, that's interesting. Anybody else have any research experience or knowledge there?
Didn't they in Vietnam? Didn't they during Vietnam put them in clerk positions in the U.S. if they didn't go to Canada?
If they didn't go to Canada, totally avoiding the draft, which was illegal to do, but they were since forgiven. Yeah.
Well, I have another ancestor who left Germany to avoid the Prussian army, and never then served in World War I. So I think, at least in my family, I'm not like Dave. I don't have that many people. I can list them that ever served because I have I don't go back that far in the U.S. And the whole group really did try to avoid serving in the Prussian army because basically you were slaughtered.
Yeah, they were expendable.
They were they were the human shield.
Yep.
Of the 1800s.
And then Valerie is reacting to the kind of story reporting you did, Dan, by saying these are all the reasons why she's writing her mom's story. 97-year journey of her life with all the documents, photos, newspaper articles, memorabilia. Yeah. Just take his post and use that as an outline. Example. Okay. So now we'll pull up her mom was the main clerk at the local selective service draft board. The newspaper articles telling of the boys she put on the bus touch my heart. Wow. Miriam says home front and support positions in the military were vital too. My 3 grandfathers were older men in World War II and so served in support positions. Yep. Is that gosh, we got 10 minutes?
Yes.
Gosh. Okay. Grandpa Robbins was a flight mechanic in the Army Air Corps for planes flying supplies, mail and men from Canada to Alaska and North Dakota. Grandpa Volk was an Army cook in Europe. Step Grandpa De Vries was an Army mail clerk in North Africa. Wow. One of the things that Cousin Russ did in the Coast Guard um, in Vietnam was they would bring mail up the Delta.
Mm.
They would deliver bags of mail, and they would help with refueling. They could bring fuel off the big ships because they didn't draw as much water and could go farther up into the Delta. Thanks, Jill, realizing how important it is to pass this down to your son. So much will be lost when I leave this planet. In more ways than one, dear Valerie. Man, remember the days when we could go to conferences and hug each other? And last time I saw you, I think might have been up in Minnesota. I don't know. I think it was. That was a long time ago. Makes those days all the more precious. We need to remember not all men who fought during the Civil War fought in Civil War battles. Interesting. My great-grandfather, Reuben F. Miner, served in the Dakota Territory during the Civil War and was part of the Army protecting soldiers from Indians. Many of the Civil War, particularly Southern generals, were out in the West. You're right. Thank you, Betty Lou. Prior to their service in the Civil War, we've seen them at camps out in on the plaques at the camps out in Utah, fighting down the Mormon incursion. Not that we were encouraged. Anyway, they were there. And I'm like, wait, is that the same general? And Gordon goes, yes, because he knows these things.
So didn't they take the Confederate prisoners of war and give them a choice of staying in prison or going out west to fight the Indians during the Civil War? I'd heard that. I didn't know if that was true or not.
I've heard that they would let them go out of prison. Well, prisons on both sides during the Civil War were absolute hell. We must state that first.
Mm-hmm.
You know, yeah, I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that I can't say with authority, so I'm not going to say.
Mm-hmm.
Vietnam years, they served as clerks back in the U.S., okay? Randy says, I found my treasure trove of Isaac Seaver's Civil War pension file and wrote many blogs about it. All captured in, and then we'll get the rest of it. Oh, there is a story about the Isaac Seaver's pension. In Vietnam, they often were medics. I have a friend who was a conscientious objector, and so a medic. And not all the medics were conscientious objectors.
Right.
My best friend Jane, from the second half of sixth grade on to the present, her older brother Mark was a medic, and was that scary when we didn't hear from him for about 2 weeks, and we knew where he had started because they didn't carry weapons. Medics didn't carry weapons, which is probably why conscientious objectors could feel comfortable there because they were being of service. And so now he has Agent Orange and stuff like that. Bill's saying too, he knows that many conscientious objectors served as medics. And they needed medics. What have we got? Monique saying she got an email from Family Search telling me about veterans I have in my family. I'll probably get an email, or probably have already. Sign in to Family Search under the Activities tab, All Activities, and then honoring your military rep. Yeah, thank you about that. You know, stuff's happening left and right. It's very good. Okay, so who served at Vancouver, Washington? Oh, that was your continuation. Okay, galvanized Yankee, that's the term I was looking for, Bill, were rebels who later joined the Union Army and typically served in the Western states. It takes a village to get our brains in gear. Thanks, Bill. Man, every one of you on the YouTube side is a panelist. You're getting the story across. You're helping us complete our understanding of all this. Dan, you have one more thing to share, it looks like. So let's look at, oh, you've got a similar thing on your Henry Lawson.
Yeah, I was just really kind of enjoying listening to you speak on the Civil War documents, because that's really not, um, a conflict that I have a lot of experience with. I didn't really have any direct ancestors that were involved in the Civil War. I had ancestors that were involved on both sides of the Revolutionary War, but by the time of the Civil War, nearly all of my family was in Canada. So I did have one cousin that I've researched. They were a family from Scotland who came to Canada. They were involved in the 1837 rebellion of Upper Canada, which was when a group of Canadians attempted to overthrow the then British government in Canada unsuccessfully. And then after that, they headed to the United States. And so I was just kind of comparing my document to the one that you'd shown for your ancestor, just to try and learn a little bit more about what I could find out about this cousin who was killed in the American Civil War in North Carolina.
So so he was killed during the battle. Did not.
Yeah.
Okay, so first I wonder, just leave it on that card, please.
Oh, sorry.
Leave it on that card, because I want to explain something. And we've got to go because our time's almost up. So first of all, when my daughters were helping me photocopy that pension file for William Henry Phillips, and we saw that abbreviation or that word invalid, they thought it meant invalid. Didn't get it, So at first I would have thought maybe he died on the battlefield, because there's no invalid application or certificate. Secondly, I would have thought he died before pensions were given. And then that's why there is nothing there for his date of filing or application or anything like that. That would be a very interesting file to get from the National Archives. And let me mention, there's three ways to do it. I would hire a genealogist, one of several, to go there personally and do it. You can order it directly through the National Archives in two formats: selected records or the complete file. So selected records it's a subset, and it would have the basic forms that the medical condition, where it has a diagram of the guy's body and where injuries might have been, etc. But also there's a form that the soldier completes, or in this case, the widow. The soldier has to complete who his wife was, and if she's dead or just they're divorced, if there's a subsequent wife, and the children by each marriage, which is considered highly important. But there are other documents, like most of the information I have on William Henry A. Phillips, that little letter that his wife wrote explaining about the difference in how he referred to himself in documents, would not have been part of that small subset called the selected records. Otherwise, you can pay for the complete file. I can give you the name. All right, a couple more things. More than 10,000 Canadians joined the Union Army during the Civil War. Miriam has one ancestor who did this, and her children's father has one. And many famous generals were, oh, that's what you're saying, were for both sides were stationed at Fort Vancouver prior to the war. And are we talking Fort Vancouver down on the Columbia River? I think so. Not Vancouver, British Columbia. We have to like specify. Okay. And then Hillary is saying this is her article about her great uncles that she has confirmed that Ernest Roy and Roy are the same people. And Miriam says, yes, that's Vancouver, Washington. Okay. All right. We could keep going, but our time is far spent. We have had an emotional morning, showing our appreciation for those who have served in the military. Um, it's it's been an honor to hear the names, to have you who with a mic read the names. Um, it's like when we get together with our African American friends, when they speak the names, when they say the names of the ancestors, they are not forgotten. And our soldiers, men and women, and the support teams and the medics, etc., are we love them. We're honoring them today. Um, Jill is giving I'll share this just before we go. Thank you. I didn't know about this meeting. Um, it's today. Is it
Yes.
today? Oh my gosh. You're going to be all webinared out. Here's the Zoom link. There's the handout. And it's about the Great War and its stories, researching your World War I soldier. Let me share this publicly. And there you go. That's the last one going out. Yeah, for the Wenatchee area, Jenny, boy, are you glad we don't have to travel to Wenatchee? We like Wenatchee, but it's horrible weather out today, and it'd be snow up over Snoqualmie, definitely.
This will be a Zoom meeting.
All right, that's wonderful. I'm so glad to bring to everyone's attention what my panelists are doing. Yes, Sherry says, please hit the subscribe button down there on the YouTube side, and you can click and determine if you want to be, how you want to be notified of upcoming events. And we will be here next week. We have a lot of methodology things to discuss, some interesting research that Hillary has done. Um, that we're going to kind of extend a little bit because of the military service. I do want you all to have this one link, which I did not yet share, and I will give it to you because this is a particularly beautiful way to use the technology to tell the story of land of snow. I've turned off the sound, but I want you to have it. So let me send this out. This is a good way to remember. And also one other thing, boy, there's always one more thing. Melinda, who's on the other side, on the YouTube side, contributed this other link. Let me pull it up, which explains the difference or taps is what they play when a soldier at the funeral. And you can hear it here. The last post is what they call it over in Great Britain. I didn't know. I just thought taps was taps. And what's the difference between them? They're bugle calls. Anything else that I really desperately have to say? Oh, yes. Joyce, one of our normal regulars, couldn't attend today, but she would like to share that in her DAR chapter, they have a woman who's 102 years old. She's a World War II vet. She's now so elderly that she can't get out and attend the meetings, but their DAR chapter continues to honor her and other veterans in their chapter. That's all good. All right, folks, there's nothing left to say, but I'm Dear Myrtle, your not so retired friend in genealogy. Happy family tree climbing, everybody. That's a wrap.